What's Up and Why, bringing you the bright side of life one fun moment at a time. Brought to you by the New Thought Media Network. Please put your hands together for your hosts, Rev Casey Taylor and Miss B Lovely.
Hey, it is just me today. Miss B Lovely is down for the count, out with the flu. And she told us a good 2 hours before the show, she was like, hey, I was going to try and rally. And I'm going to tell Miss B Lovely right now, if she is watching this now or watching this later, that if she is ever feeling like you need to rally, if you ever feel like you need to rally, and this goes for anybody, you feel like you need a rally, just don't. It's not necessary. Whatever it is that you think you need to rally for, if it is something that you do once a week, if it is something that you don't get paid for, do not rally. Say, hey, I don't feel good. I'm not coming. And if you suddenly find yourself feeling amazing and incredible at the time of when your show was set or when the thing was, just enjoy the fact that you had the time, that it was done, that you got what you needed, and you get to sit back and watch your show. So that's just my word of advice for everybody. And I realize I have not yet introduced myself. My name is Reverend Casey Taylor. I use they, them pronouns. And as I am rocking solo for today's episode of What's Up and Why, where we bring you the brighter side of life, one fun moment at a time, that I have declared this episode as going rogue. I am going rogue. Not like B Lovely tells me what to do. She can't tell me what to do. Today is our cousin's birthday. Me and B Lovely, our cousins, and our cousin Cece has a birthday today. Shout out to Cece. And so both me and B Lovely this morning posted our birthday Facebook galleries of us all together over the course of the years. And I love that I always have new pictures to refresh when I shout out my cousin for her birthday. And in my memories, it's like 9 years ago, that's the one that came up for me today. 9 years ago, these are the pictures that you posted. So having social media serve as a living memory of documenting moments in our lives, the way that we shout each other out, the way that we celebrate one another, the way that we look at our memories. Like, I know I am an old timer for using Facebook, but I was just talking to a 22-year-old yesterday about how this 22-year-old keeps deactivating it and coming back because there's all these things that you can do on this social media app. Like I said, old timer, on that social media app that you can't do on the other one. Like you can't do events on any of them. And to me, Facebook is a great way to connect with people, your people from high school that you would have never ever talked to and never known a thing about what they were doing, or people that maybe you met once and y'all vibed, and then like you get an opportunity to see that y'all really do vibe. Like there's this guy, Andrew, I used to hang out with when I lived in Chicago. We both lived in Chicago at that time. Andrew moved to New York. I moved to LA. We continued to see each other's stuff on Facebook. And when I was in Vegas, he lives in Vegas, I was like, hey, let's meet up. And like, we talked about all the things that we've been talking about on social media for the last 10 years. And I learned a lot more about him. And like I said, stayed connected in ways that I never would if that app existed. But in the real reality of social media, and we've talked about this on the show in What's Up and Why, that despite the fact that there are some benefits to social media, to staying connected, there are some real downsides to it. And today, this is why I say I'm going rogue. Today in the United States of America, on social media, we've been having a really big conversation about pedophilia. And it's not, I'm going to say right now, it is not my favorite topic. And I'm sure it's not a lot of our favorite topics. In fact, I think we don't talk about it as a country because it's no one's favorite topic. No one wants to think about what causes it. And I think that's the biggest thing that I want to stop at. Instead of making it about who did it, let's talk about what causes it. And this is not to absolve anybody. This is not to make excuses for anybody. It's to identify that if we don't look at what causes pedophilia, how can we treat it? What can we do to prevent it? How do we provide the services, the support, the resources that are needed for children to help ensure that they grow up to be healthy adults that are able to honor each other's boundaries. And in the conversation about pedophilia, I think we need to take it one step back to boundaries, because that's really where it starts. Is, are you a person who believes that somebody else's boundaries don't apply to you? And I've mentioned this on this show. I've mentioned it for the last couple weeks that I have been reading this book called Erased by Anna Malaika Tubbs. It's called Erased by Anna Malaika Tubbs. We might have a banner for that, Clarissa, if you got one somewhere from the last couple weeks. And in this book, Erased, it's about how the structure of the United States was intentionally designed for patriarchy to be built into the fabric of the country. That is the situation, is that our founding fathers, and let's be real, this group of men, we call them our founding fathers because that is who they were. These men felt a feeling of white supremacy, of being complicit in the system of enslaving African people, and at the same time also saw themselves as supreme for being male. So this book really talks about how our school systems, how our healthcare system, how our policing system, everything was designed for white and male to be prioritized and everything else to be othered, and for there to be this sense of disconnection between white men and everyone else. And what is occurring right now, today, in these social media streets, is that we are experiencing a moral reckoning. Right now, we are having a conversation that as a country we've needed to have. We've needed to have these conversations in our school systems, in our social services organizations, in our spiritual centers. I am the senior minister of the United Life Center for Spiritual Living in Oklahoma City. And we are talking about this on Sunday. And not this Sunday. Actually, I can't even speak to. I'm not the speaker this Sunday, so I'm not the one. But the person who spoke last Sunday absolutely brought this up, that we're not avoiding these conversations. And in this moment in our culture's history, we are being invited to look at our values, to look at how we treat other people. We are being invited to look at this experience of equality and what it means. And in the last few years, for me personally, this experience of a moral reckoning started in 2020, when our country started having a conversation about race in a way that I had never experienced before. And this is even like I feel like the Black Lives Matter movement started it, but in 2020, there was this moment where people who held beliefs of white supremacy were empowered to speak them out loud. That was the big difference for me, that there were people in my life, people who I considered friends, people who are literally family, that felt empowered to voice statements, beliefs, feelings, ideas aligned with white supremacy. And something that I noticed still to this day is that none of those people really saw those beliefs as white supremacist. And my way of looking at it, the way that I really come from, is recognizing that racism is in evolution, that where we were in the 1960s, specifically, where Jim Crow laws were in full effect, somebody that lets a Black person into their house, and I'm speaking specifically for my family, my white family members, when they allowed my Black mother into their house, they were like, okay, done, check, no longer racist. I have achieved this, without recognizing that there's all other kinds of beliefs associated with white supremacy that were taught in our school systems, that are embedded in every single institution that we are a part of. Those of us who are born and raised in these here United States have been ingrained in this experience of patriarchy and white supremacy. And to me, that's where it all stems down to. That is the foundation. And that's no one's fault. This is where we get into the bright side of life, is that we are being invited not to point fingers at each other, not to criticize each other for having different ways of thinking and different ways of being. We are invited to have compassion and love and grace for one another, for being who we are, where we are. As I said, in 2020, when I experienced my personal moral reckoning, as I recognized how white supremacy, and that's where it started with me. The book that I referenced is about patriarchy, but in 2020, I was reading about white supremacy because this conversation we were having about race was helping was spotlighting how internalized racism had been fully present in my life, in the ways that I showed up, and the way that I serve in spiritual leadership, in every capacity, in the ways that I served as a television executive at Viola Davis's production company. At that time, I experienced this great moral reckoning and had this feeling that I needed to be a brand new person, that this internalized racism was something that needed to disappear so that I can do the things that I wanted to do. And in reality, it doesn't work like that. I wasn't able to become a brand new person overnight. I went to therapy regularly. I educated myself. This is why I'm mentioning this book about patriarchy, because I'm continuing to educate myself, and feeling that the horror and the shock and the shame of not only my own choices, my own complicity, but how I didn't even notice how complicit I was. So that healing journey has been ongoing. And in the first year, it was beyond painful. I could not work. I left my job at Juvie literally for this purpose, because I couldn't read a script. My brain was not operating in a way that was sufficient. And because we were in a global pandemic, and had been in for the last 3 months, and I am such an extrovert, I recognized that the mental health crisis that I was experiencing, and also learned that our mental health care system wasn't exactly designed to meet and serve and support me. There was no book I can go to. I did read some books, and they were valuable and helpful, but what I was experiencing, there wasn't a book. That's actually how Making Peace with Your Inner Shit Talker was written. It came out of, this would have been really helpful and valuable for me. So if a book doesn't exist to support me with this, I guess I got to be the one to write it. And I'm going to get to that later in the show. But first, I'm gonna represent both of our segments. I'm going to start with it's giving reverence, and I'm going to give reverence to Reverend Mark Anthony Lord. I had meant to mention him in my check-in, but I'm gonna give him reverence now. Mark Anthony Lord is was the senior minister. He's the person who started and founded the Bodhi Center for Spiritual Living in Chicago years ago. And last night I attended a webinar that he hosted, and all of his stuff, like his website, Clarissa put his website right up there for y'all. All of his stuff is available. Like, this is a recording. You can access this for free. So this thing I'm about to talk about, you can get this from his website. And the webinar was called Turning Anger into Power. And he talked about how each one of us was raised, those of us who were raised in these here United States, were raised to suppress our anger. And this webinar was about letting it out, recognizing the sacred nature of anger, and that we can use it intentionally creatively in a way to not only provide power for ourselves, but not have it live in our body, fester, and create these kinds of toxic results and resentment. So we were invited into a practice. He facilitated a practice, which is in the webinar that you can access yourself for free, where we were guided to identify what are you mad about. And for me, it was very clear. It was the white supremacist patriarchy. And we were invited to imagine an altar. And at the time, I was hungry. I hadn't eaten all day and I wasn't trying to imagine nothing. And I knew good and well that if I had tried to pretend like I didn't have food sitting in my microwave and smell it and feel it, that was just going to make me angry and that I wouldn't be able to participate in the exercise. So I decided I was going to get my food and do this visualization with my eyes open in front of me. And in the visualization, we were invited to picture the garden of our minds. My living room, I got a bunch of plants back here. So I was like, all right, I don't need to imagine nothing. Here are my plants. And to imagine an altar in the center of our garden. And I have an altar at the center with all of my plants around. So I didn't have to imagine nothing. And on my altar, he said to imagine putting these rocks. And I already had a bunch of rocks on my altar that I'm looking at while I'm eating my rice and beans. And so I'm looking at these rocks, and he's like, the things that you're releasing, these rocks are the things that you're releasing around your anger. And on my altar are pictures of my family and pictures of my friends. And a lot of the ways that I have been triggered, as I mentioned, my family who sees themselves as no longer racist because they love me, they are the people that I have been most challenged by long before anybody got caught on anybody's Epstein list. And so looking at my family on this altar, where these rocks are, where this man is inviting us to visualize something that is literally in front of me. Like, I don't have to imagine the garden of my mind. Look at me, my love. Amy Steinberg made me this love poncho. Like, I don't need to imagine this garden in my mind. I'm out here living it. And so as I released these feelings of anger towards my family for their complicity in our white supremacist patriarchal structure, I got to remember that it's not their fault. That just as challenging it was for me to unlearn these beliefs, as challenging it was for me to function as a human being in the world, cooking for myself, showering. I couldn't even imagine working. And at that time, unemployment was $600 extra a week or something like that. I think it was $300 per check or something like that, $600 a month. That having that cushion of, okay, us being in a pandemic, me being unemployed, I get to focus and prioritize my mental health. I fully understand that most of us are not courageous enough or not in a position where something like that is available to us. So when I see what I had to experience to unlearn internalized racism, and I'm out here, the intersectionality of every kind of minority one can think of. I am not non-binary, despite the fact that I use they, them pronouns. I use they, them pronouns because I identify as gender non-conforming. I identify as a cisgender, gender non-conforming person who uses they, them pronouns. I'm mixed race. I was born in a home where Judaism and Christianity was practiced, and I was introduced to a new thought way of thinking when I was 18. My father gave me a copy of Conversations with God, mailed it to me in college. So I was really empowered and supported for my ideas of spirituality, of God being everywhere, omnipresent, not specific to this one guy named Jesus, that I gotta choose him as my Lord and personal savior. And if I don't, I'm wrong and I'm burning in hell. I wasn't raised in that narrative, despite the fact that there are people in my family who feel that way. And that forgiveness exercise, it wasn't a forgiveness exercise, but it ended up being one for me, was this recognizing that my family, they're in this, we're all in this country together. We are all in this together. So shout out to Reverend Mark Anthony Lord for guiding me to that experience. I'm grateful for the creative juices. This is why I'm going rogue today and feeling empowered to go solo today, because that experience was just really powerful for me. So feel free to go to Mark Anthony Lord's website and check out that. And there's a bunch. There was one about sex that I went to last week that was incredible. So he's the one. Mark Anthony Lord was the first Center for Spiritual Living minister I had ever met. He's the one who introduced me to this. And as a minister in this movement, he's the one who set off my journey. So I'm grateful that I get an opportunity to continue to learn from him virtually, from wherever he is in the world to wherever I am in the world. So as I have given Mark Anthony some reverence, I'm going to transition us to usually what is Be Lovely segment, which is called Do Better Blues. And in this segment, Be Lovely identifies somebody in the world who has done something. One, for the purposes of spotlighting it, but second, like an invitation. We get to do better. And instead of identifying any one person, as I've mentioned, we are all, those of us in these here United States, and those of us who are outside of the United States, know what we got going on here in this country, that we were submerged in this environment, in this white patriarchal environment. Our country was intentionally designed this way. And I don't know if any other country, I don't know a lot because my country intentionally chooses not to teach me about world history, but I don't know if there is another country that was intentionally designed in this way. And the fact that we are still so new, that we are less than 400 years old, it feels to me that the way that our culture was structured, and the time and in the way and the intentionality of white supremacy and patriarchy built into the foundation of the country itself, into the Constitution, that as I am inviting each one of us to do better, what that means is to have grace for one another, which does not mean to apologize for pedophiles. It does mean that doing better means that we are having these conversations, that we are looking at the root causes of pedophilia, that instead of pointing fingers and blaming each other for who they support and what they are and aren't doing, that we are looking at ourselves and identifying what is ours to do. And sometimes what is ours to do is to simply have grace for each other, is to have compassion, is to forgive, is to go through our own cleansing process and recognize that the example that we serve out in the world inspires the people around us. It may not inspire the people we want to be inspired by it, but regardless, it'll be inspired. Your actions, your decision to show up as the change that you wish to see in the world creates that change around you. And I'm not just saying this as like a minister who says things like that. I've always resonated with this concept of being the change I wish to see in the world. And I have seen firsthand, as I have embraced this perspective and this way of being, how my world has changed around me. Maybe people are still voting in a way that I don't like, but the world that I'm living, as I said, the visualization of recognizing I don't need to close my eyes and imagine a world that works for me. It's already here in my house, that I'm living a life of love and community and belonging unlike I've ever imagined, because I learned how to be a safe place for love and compassion and belonging. So I wholeheartedly support, recommend doing better for all of us to show up as the change we wish to see in the world by having more love, more grace, more compassion, and doing our own work, educating ourselves and recognizing that as we show up in our best day ever energy, that it transforms the world around us. So speaking of that best day ever energy, I'm going to close with Making Peace with Your Inner Shit Talker. This is the book that I mentioned, and that best day ever energy is mentioned in this. On the 90-day program that I created, I have my Substack page does a what is it? What am I doing on Substack? I've been writing writing about each day's practice. So each practice comes with a reflection question and an affirmation and a song. And so what I've been doing in Substack is either writing about one of those three things, writing about the song, the affirmation, or the reflection question. And I've been stuck on the section called This Culture Shit for a long time on my Substack. This is where I stopped in my blogs. I haven't written since I hit this culture shit. So it's not even there yet. It's going to be there super soon. I actually am going to put this video here in that Substack article and provide a little context. Because as I said, usually each article has been about the reflection question, the affirmation, or the song of the day. The next Substack article, This Culture Shit, is going to be about the section itself. Because in the program, I provide a little heading, a little context. Before somebody reads the reflection question, gets into 4 days of practice about that subject, I have a little heading. And so I'm going to start, the next Substack is going to be focused on this one sentence from the heading. And it says, we all know what it's like to feel like an outsider, but we rarely take the time to reflect on what it means to be an insider. And what I was saying about the experience of learning about our culture is that when you grow up inside of a culture, it's incredibly difficult to look at it from the outside. People who are not American can look at us Americans and be like, ha ha ha, y'all are so silly. That is a thing they can do. And because we are born, raised and bred here, it is incredibly difficult for us to see our culture from the outside. It often requires literally traveling to another country and seeing the way somebody else does it to be like, oh, okay, we are doing some stuff backwards. The person who wrote Erased, the book that I'm reading right now, she talked about, Anna Malika Tubbs talked about, she's mixed race and grew up all over the world before she came back to America. So her parents are American. They talked about their experience of being American. And she talked about learning about what other people's ideas of America was, and then came here as a teenager, saw the movie Mean Girls, and was like, oh, okay, this is what everybody's been saying. There is this hierarchy, and this is how girls treat each other. Patriarchy, and the non-binary and the people of color are stereotypical side characters. This is the complicated things that my parents have been trying to communicate to me about our country my whole life. Like, this is where she came from. And so she wrote this book, Erased, from that lens. As somebody who was not born and raised in this country, raised outside in all kinds of other countries, learned about this country through the lens of her American parents, and then came here and then wrote this book about patriarchy, doing the research. Let me know. Like, she's citing things left and right about how this country was intentionally founded as a white supremacist patriarchy. So this culture shit is about inviting us to look at our relationship to our culture, to being an insider, to taking some time and reflect as I talk about the commonality of pedophilia and how we don't talk about it, as I talk about the structure of the white supremacist patriarchy that we are in. What feelings come up for you? Is it defensive? Is it angry? Is it shame? Is it hopelessness? Taking time to look at our anger, at those feelings that we don't like so much, feeling our feelings. That was a big thing that came for me out of my healing journey, that I learned that because I didn't feel safe to be who I was, I kept my feelings suppressed. And the more I got to know myself, my feelings were coming out in ways that were not at all appropriate in corporate settings. So I'm so grateful that I got to be on unemployment while I went through that phase. So like I said, wherever you are in making peace with your own inner shit talker, whatever it is that comes up for you, I invite you to just, as my energy's been super high, I invite you to just take a moment to relax, to settle. And I'm going to pray us out. I invite you to think of your own understanding of spirit, resting in this knowing and trusting that whatever is yours to do, your path forward, your place, what going rogue looks like for you, is divinely inspired, and divinely led. Your intuition already knows the way. So I'm grateful to trust and know that each one of us is experiencing the best day ever, no matter how this day looks or feels. And I'm grateful for the shift that takes place in our lives as a result of our decision to show up and receive whatever it was that we were meant to receive, and to act in whatever way we are meant to act. And in gratitude, I invite us to affirm this prayer however you are most comfortable in closing prayer. I choose to close by saying, and so it is. Thank you for joining me for this episode, this rogue episode of What's Up and Why. My name is Reverend Casey Taylor, and here's your reminder to ask the question, what's up and why? Have the best day ever.